Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. This week, on this episode, we're going to discuss the holiday of Hannukah. And obviously this year it's a little bit muted based on the situation that's going on in Israel and people who are not able to celebrate with us. Most of us have friends and family members who are fighting or who have tragically been harmed in the attacks of the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas. But I wanted to talk about Hannukah, especially because this holiday has somewhat been forgotten over the years, or changed, let's say. And now more than ever, we need to understand what the meaning of Hannukah should be and is and always has been, in addition to how it's being affected today by the situation going on in the Middle East and the rise of antisemitism. I'm sure most of my listeners understand the Hannukah story and probably have heard it many times before. For anyone who doesn't understand or hasn't heard it yet, there is an old episode from last year we had done called A Semi-Autonomous Israel and the Hannukah Story. Check it out on your favorite podcast source. You can get a little bit more info about the story. Generally speaking, the story of Hannukah is a celebration of the fact that the Jewish people are not only in their ancestral homeland, but they were able to take control or retake control from the Greek people who were taking over their land and forbidding their rituals and not allowing them to practice their Judaism. In addition to, of course, causing destruction and ruining the temple to God in Jerusalem, the Jews were able to actually take that over, clean it up, light the menorah, and have 8 days of light in order to symbolize the rededication to God. The Maccabeans, or Hasmonean dynasty, actually held Israel semi-autonomous for many years until the Roman Empire took over and colonized once again. The story of triumph over our enemies, people trying to stop us from practicing our religion, fulfilling the duties that are required to us by God, all of these things came down on the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland by a colonizing force. But the Jews refused to accept this. This one family, a priestly family known as the Maccabean family or Hasmonean dynasty, decided that they weren't going to stand for that, and they took on an entire Seleucid empire. The Selucid Greeks had armies and vast resources, and yet these Judeans decided, you know what, we are going to actually stand up, and they had God on their side, and they refused to bow down, they refused to change their culture, they refused to give up their temple to God, and they fought with everything they had to reclaim their homeland and rededicate their temple to God. It's very inspiring, and we could probably use that kind of inspiration right now. When we see the antisemitism rising around the world, it's hard not to compare these two stories. You have the ancient Judeans who are in their homeland being told they are not allowed to practice their religion, or they need to go into hiding in order to continue practicing the religion that they've been practicing for their entire lives. In North America or around the world today, we are seeing the unfortunate situation of Jewish people feeling afraid and having to hide themselves, whether that's hiding their Magen David necklaces, taking off kippas, or even taking down mezuzahs. It's hard not to think that maybe in Judea, when the Seleucid Greeks were walking around telling people they were no longer allowed to practice, how many people may have changed the way they looked, changed their names, maybe took down a mezuzah. It's honestly a shame and incredibly tragic to think that people are feeling that they need to do that today. But we could take a little bit of a note from the Hannukah story, that they didn't do it willingly, that they made sure to stand up and fight back and be proud of who they are. Because in the end, by hiding yourself, you're not necessarily going to improve the situation. You could sit back and do things in hiding, but things will always end up getting worse. Anti-Semitism just doesn't go away on its own. It goes away when we fight back, when we push out the oppressors, when we push out the colonizers, when we take our Stars of David out and we say we are here and not going anywhere. That's how we end up surviving. It's really sad how close the Jewish people have come to being annihilated over and over and over again. Whether it's physically, like in the time of the Holocaust, or spiritually, like in the time of the Maccabees. The Jewish people never gave up, and they always moved forward. And we had our heads up high, and we said it proudly that we are Jews, we are part of the family of Israel, and we are not going anywhere, no matter what threat there is against us. So if we understand the fact that Hannukah is about a time when our people were restricted from practicing their religion, and the Jewish people throwing off that yoke of that colonizer and practicing that religion and lighting those menorahs, even though we were not supposed to. It is so painful and so ironic even that we see people all around the world in various countries in North America due to anti-Semitism canceling the lighting of menorahs. For many years, people have been lighting menorahs publicly. Usually it's some Jewish group, a local group of some kind, maybe a Chabad organization, who puts up a very large menorah in the city center by a town hall or outside of a public building of some kind, and they do this big festival where they light the first candle publicly, and it's a beautiful light for everyone to come out and share. However, because of the anti-Semitism that's happening all around the world, and in North America especially, we have seen cities and towns canceling their lighting of their public menorahs. There's two reasons usually given. One is the fear of what protests may happen. We've seen the disgusting displays of protests where people are harassed or assaulted or intimidated by supposedly anti-Israel activists. And rather than allow the Jewish people to practice what they've always practiced in town centers and city squares and things of that nature, unfortunately we're deciding that it's better to just cancel it because of the threat that the evil people who won't let us practice our religion and want to protest our religion and our faith, we're going to let them win, and we're going to cancel it. The second reason, unfortunately, is a lot of politicians, due to this conflict between Hamas and Israel, have tried to stand up against Israel and therefore are no longer supporting the Jewish community, as if they're the same thing. I can't go to a menorah lighting because then I'm supporting Israel, and therefore that's mean to the Palestinian victims, so therefore I'm not going to go, and I can't support it. I think this is obviously just ridiculous, even though, yes, Hannukah is a holiday of an indigenous people celebrating their indigenous nature. It has nothing to do with Palestinian Arabs. It has nothing to do with the Middle East conflict today. You going there is showing support for a community that's currently being targeted more than any other community. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, and by you not going, by you canceling it, it's actually giving legitimacy to these people who are trying to cancel us and stop us from practicing a religion publicly. We are not going to go back to the times of the Maccabees where the Greek Seleucid Empire decides you're not allowed to practice this anymore. We're not sanctioning you to perform these rituals. We are not asking the government for their help or their support. But you know what? The Jewish community right now more than ever would like that support, to know that we are not alone, that we're not going to have to fight like the Maccabees in the time of Hannukah. It is rather sad and unfortunate and almost even ironic that Hannukah has actually been called by many the Jewish Christmas. The irony of a holiday devoted to our independence and our removal of colonization being used as a way to assimilate us with everybody else. It is not a Jewish Christmas. Unfortunately, I understand in Western civilization, we have somehow decided that it's more important to fit in and feel like the Christians that we wanted to make our Hannukah very similar. People put up blue and white lights as opposed to the traditional Christmas lights. People hand out gifts like they would on Christmas, things like that. And it's a little bit of a tragedy that we've lost the meaning of Hannukah. And that's why it's so important now that we are actually taking it back and making sure that the real message, the removal of colonization and rededication of the ancestral homeland, is the key and important focus of this holiday. I saw a rather big change last year, and I was actually quite proud of it. Seeing these people online, these influencers, these pro-Israel, Zionist, pro-Judean movement people speaking about the holiday as it was intended, as an anti-colonization holiday. It was actually pretty interesting to watch as people online were calling out those who are anti-Israel and anti-self-determination, call it anti-Zionist, whatever you want to call it, who were wishing us a happy Hannukah. And people would actually explain to these people who didn't believe the Jews were an indigenous people, and they would explain, actually, you're wishing us a happy Hannukah, while acknowledging the fact that we were there and that we were colonized. And so how do you do both of those at the same time? How do you say that Israel doesn't exist? It didn't have a people there. We didn't have a culture. It's not our land. Yet meanwhile also saying, by the way, happy Hannukah, that we celebrate the fact that you got rid of the colonizers thousands and thousands of years ago. It's ironic and it's crazy. And it's funny because this year I actually noticed a change. I looked at the squad members, as they're known, in the U.S. House. These are members who are very anti-Israel for a variety of reasons. You can go through those on another day. But the fact is that previously these people had been called out for acknowledging Hannukah. And then therefore, how are they going to deal with it this year? And I actually looked at all of their pages. the typical suspects of Ilhan Omar, of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib, who many times in the past pandered to their Jewish audiences and wished them a happy Hanukkah. Maybe they wanted to seem like they weren't anti-Semitic, so therefore they would wish them happy Hanukkah. And yet, meanwhile, now that they've been called out as of last year, I did not find one that wished a happy Hanukkah because they knew they were going to be called out for their anti-Israel beliefs alongside wishing a happy Hanukkah. So for whatever it's worth, it's a little bit of a Hanukkah miracle that we've been able to teach these people a lesson that they're not going to be silly and think that we aren't an indigenous people, while also acknowledging a holiday that talks about our indigenous nature to that land. In the end, I feel like this Hanukkah is a little bit of a turning point. I feel like this Hanukkah, we've actually started to stand up and realized how important this is. Just like the time of the Maccabees, when we saw them stand up and say enough is enough to the Selucid Greeks, and they said, we are going to take back our culture, our religion, our heritage, and our temple, and we are going to not hide who we are anymore. I think this Hanukkah is actually that. I think I see a lot of influencers online. I see all the comments that you guys are making, the likes I get on all of our posts on social media, and I see a change. I see people are willing to stand up and be proud and no longer take what we've been given for so many years of hiding and having to apologize for who we are. And I think this is a huge turning point. Don't give up your fight. Let's be like the Maccabees. Let's use this Hanukkah as an excuse and a reason to be proud of who we are and what we've accomplished. And don't let anybody stop you from practicing how you want to and what you want to practice. And for those politicians who are out there who are trying to cancel Jewish events in order to keep us quote unquote safe from the people who hate us, stop trying to give in to what they're doing and trying to keep us safe. The way that we are safe is by having support from people like you in order to allow us to participate in our religion and our culture freely. Don't be like the Selucid Greeks trying to stop us from participating in our public events, because we will do it anyway. Because we are strong, we are proud, and we come from the DNA of the Maccabees, and we will fight for our religion and our culture and our homeland, no matter what you do or say. Wishing all of our listeners a very happy Hanukkah. May this year bring you so much light, happiness, and hopefully an end to this war. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.